Is there a link issue, Austin, you think?
I don't know. I mean, I just looked and I sent.
I saw that, yeah, you sent that, but I wasn't sure. We only have 4, I'm not sure who the call in is, but I assume this is OPA who gave us the links, or?
No, I mean, I created these links and put them on there. So
Okay.
no different than previous times. I'm wondering if they're on the wrong. And also, if someone was joining a previous one, it would let me know that someone was joining a previous meeting as the person that set the meeting up.
Good evening. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if others show up, and then we'll start our presentation.
Mhm.
Thanks for sending the link, Austin.
Yeah, I don't know what was wrong there. I don't know, but glad you're able to get in.
Are you ready, Austin?
All right. Well, good evening. I'm Austin Gastrell with the Department of Planning and Development, and joined by my co-presenter tonight, Michael Davis from Land Development Services. We're here this evening to provide a status update on the Parking Reimagined project, including a summary of significant proposed changes and new draft bicycle parking requirements. I'd also like to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and will be put on our webpage. A video of the meeting will be put on our webpage, just like all of our other open houses or other meetings that we have put on. And then further, the chat log as well. If you decide to use the chat log, that will be put on the webpage as well. So next. In June, we updated the board on our progress with this project, which coincided with the release of our tiered framework for public comment. Since then, we have released draft minimum parking requirements for all uses in the zoning ordinance, while continuing a public outreach period, which included 6 community open houses, as well as outreach to board advisory committees, community-specific associations, and boards and industry groups. As a reminder, minimum parking rates dictate the minimum amount of parking required for a development or use. With the exception of the existing planned Tyson's Corner district, this project does not propose caps on parking known as parking maximums. As of November of 2022, we released draft ordinance text, which includes minimum draft parking rates, administrative provisions, off-street loading requirements, and minimum bicycle parking requirements for public review and comment. An in-depth review of this proposal can be found in the white paper, which is posted on the Parking Reimagined webpage. As a quick reminder, our project goals include developing parking regulations that align with the diverse context of land use within Fairfax County, such as the tiered framework. Also, we have sought ways to create more regulatory flexibility in designing and providing parking, while establishing simplified and predictable parking review processes. When we initiated this project in October of 2021, we identified some core community values that we intend to address, such as equity, affordability, environmental impact, land use site design, and economic impact. Our current white paper outlines these values and explores examples of how this project addresses them. All of these values and the proposed changes to Article 6 of the zoning ordinance positively support the goals of One Fairfax and the strategic plan. I will now hand it over to Mike Davis, who will summarize proposed changes to administrative provisions of the ordinance, as well as changes to minimum parking requirements.
Thank you very much. I don't know, Donna, if you have an open mic, but I'm hearing some background noise.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you. Subsection 6100.1 through 6100.3 of the zoning ordinance discuss the general applicability of parking requirements design of parking lots and spaces, and applicable standards to the calculation of required parking. The proposed changes outlined on the screen are intended to provide greater ease and flexibility in determining parking needs for sites and uses, which can be a complicated process, achieving little actual benefit. It should also reduce artificial requirements for more parking. Further, these changes will enhance opportunities for parking adjustments to accommodate electric vehicle chargers and parking lot landscaping, with the goal of creating opportunities for environmental enhancements, particularly for existing parking lots that lack tree cover. Also, as depicted here, we're also considering a concept to enhance requirements for safer pedestrian circulation within parking lots. While ADA requirements will continue to be in effect, we're looking at dedicated pedestrian pathway standards for the ordinance. These connections would be from existing off-site sidewalks to the primary building entrance. Next screen. This subsection of Article 6 includes base minimum parking rates for all uses identified in the zoning ordinance. These rates have been available for public review since July of 2022. In addition to the rates, many of which have been right-sized or simplified, the update includes modifications to proposed townhouse and stacked townhouse rates to fine-tune the visitor overflow parking minimums to balance parking and open space. Proposed lowering of minimum parking for offices greater than 50,000 square feet. This incorporates additional data and analysis received during the project. Reducing the outdoor restaurant seating minimum requirement from 8 to 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet, with the possibility of no minimum requirements for the seating. Eliminating the director determination requirement for parking for all public park areas. Park operators have internal design and parking supply requirements for facilities within these parks. Further changes include updated rates for shopping centers. We've also created more flexibility in the types of uses that can be within a shopping center without requiring more parking. We've also applied the shopping center concept to office uses, allowing a greater number of uses within these buildings without requiring more parking. And the section also includes vehicle stacking requirements, which have been updated following staff analysis. This includes a reduction in required stacking spaces for drive-through uses. This shows the tiered framework we've been discussing with the community since June of 2022. At least 90% of the county's land area would remain subject to baseline requirements with modifications. Minimum parking requirements below the baseline rates are focused on areas defined in the comprehensive plan as growth areas. With the intent of right-sizing parking, the framework is particularly important where the densities and intensities of development and the availability of non-auto options allow for greater innovation in approaches to lower parking supply. The range of required parking between the baseline and the existing planned Tyson's Corner requirements is between 60 and 90% of the baseline rates. This subsection defines the tiered parking framework. It also defines how residential development is proposed to be treated within the tiers. Single-family attached, stacked townhomes, and multifamily developments have proposed rates that are not specifically aligned with the percentage reductions in the tiers. Single-family attached and stacked townhomes have lower minimum rates that continue to recognize that a separate visitor overflow parking supply is needed, even when the unit parking rate is adjusted downward within the tiered framework. In lowering requirements for these unit types, we want to acknowledge that in higher density and intensity development areas of the county, less parking demand is expected, with opportunities for multimodal transport and a variety of amenities in closer proximity to the community. We're also proposing a modification to the multifamily minimum requirement in the tiered framework. Historically, parking requirements for these residential developments are based on spaces per number of units. However, we've recognized that the number of bedrooms within these types of developments provide a more accurate assessment of parking demand. Thus, we're proposing to use a bedroom measure within a higher density areas. This screen is just a reminder of the applicability of the tiered framework to an identified use, in this case, retail sales, showing a lower baseline rate in percentage increments across the tiered framework. Subsection contains options to adjust or reduce the parking supply for a development site. Today, parking adjustments are divided in the ordinance between those which can be approved by the Board of Supervisors and those which can be approved by the Director of Land Development Services. It's proposed that adjustments up to 60% less than the required parking can be approved by the director after review by technical staff. Currently, this is capped at 30% for some adjustments. It is anticipated that the board can approve reductions associated with land use actions after technical input is provided by staff. The board can approve adjustments that the director is unable to approve. The proposed changes to allowable adjustments include new options for shared parking reductions and transit-related adjustments, an affordable housing adjustment, an adjustment based on the proximity of public parking, such as metered parking or garages allowing public parking, and consideration of adjustment opportunities for sites that have historic designations and or tree coverage worthy of preservation that may conflict with minimum parking requirements. And with that, I will turn it back over to Austin to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry about that delay. Subsection 6101 defines minimum vehicle parking minimum vehicle loading requirements. These requirements are proposed to be condensed and right-sized to address current loading practices and in response to analysis of frequently waived provisions. Establishing minimum bicycle parking requirements in the ordinance was envisioned from the onset of this project. Providing these requirements is important to support bicycle usage, which offsets auto parking demand. Staff has worked with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation and the County Attorney's Office to propose bicycle parking requirements as a new section of the zoning ordinance. The bicycle parking section includes minimum required bicycle parking rates, general provisions to define when bicycle parking is required, as well as locational and design requirements for bicycle parking spaces. Bicycle parking minimum requirements will be treated similar to vehicle parking by establishing a table of minimum requirements organized by land use classification. Bicycle parking rates for land uses and use classifications are proposed to be based on either a percentage of provided vehicle parking or a number of spaces. These requirements would align with our proposed tiered framework by setting increased bicycle parking requirements in areas with denser development or in areas that are in closer proximity to public transit. This slide shows a GIS application we've been working on, which is an interactive application that will, when it is released, will allow community members as well as staff to determine what a specific property's parking requirement is. In this case, I used a property in Mosaic, 2910 District Avenue, which shows as the revitalization area parking rate. So the cool thing about this application is that it's not just address space, it's interactive to where you can scroll around in the application, click on different properties and determine what that property's parking rate is. So again, this will be on the webpage shortly and will be something that will both be helpful to staff as well as the community as a whole. Since kickoff of this project in October of 2021, we've conducted nearly 90 project meetings, which include supervisor-sponsored town halls, individual project meetings with all board members, as well as meetings with board advisory committees, community service groups, community associations, industry groups, and internal county agencies. Since January of 2022, we've met monthly with our community project work group to discuss elements of our proposal and gain their perspectives. These discussions have been important in modifying our proposals and framing our public discussions of them. After our current public outreach period, staff will make modifications as needed to create a final draft with the intent to repeal and replace the provisions currently located in Article 6 of the zoning ordinance. The updated project timeline before you shows our goal of bringing a complete proposal back to the Planning Commission and board in the spring and summer of this year. Lastly, as mentioned, we have a project webpage that's regularly updated with information and opportunities for the public to participate in the Parking Reimagined project. On this webpage currently, there is a link to a public input is a server where you can click and give your input on the proposed draft that's currently out. This comment period closes on January 16th. So if you have any information you want to give us or want to give us your opinion on the project, we'd be happy to hear it. And you can use that public input page to give us those opinions as well as tonight. But I want to thank you for your time. Sorry if there's any technical difficulties with tonight's meeting, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the project. Go ahead, Donna. Donna, you're on mute. Jim, it seems like you have a question as well. Donna, I know you have your hand up as well. You seem to be on mute, but Jim, go ahead or Donna, now that you're off mute, you want to go ahead?
Okay. I am so sorry. I was saying that a lot of people seem to have called in because there was a problem with the link.
Mhm.
Is there any way we can get the link to them so that they can participate better? Because I don't think they can raise their hands by just calling in.
You don't, yeah, I mean, I can drop that link in the chat if you would like me to. Let's see.
Austin, if I can, Susan Jolie, if I can comment, I've spent the last 15 minutes trying to get in. The link that's published on the Parking Reimagined website goes to the January 5th meeting.
Mhm.
Can't get in. The call-in number there does not provide access. Donna, I guess, got some email from you,
Yep.
which she shared with me. I know members of my community are very interested in participating, and yet the information they've been provided about how to access this meeting is completely unreliable and misleading. And
Well, Susan, I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm sorry that it's misleading, and I really do apologize that we're having this issue tonight. This is the first time we've had an issue in over a year and a half of public outreach. So I do apologize, and we're gonna do what we can. I just put the link to the meeting in the chat right now. So if there's anyone
If we're calling in, we can't access the chat either. Sorry to interrupt.
I do apologize there. So anyone that would like to participate that's calling in, you can just make your name known, and we
Well,
can go that
we
way.
can just open them up one by line. That way it's a little bit more organized.
Sure, that works. So,
Ben
Jim,
has his hand up, I think.
go ahead, Jim.
Is it my turn?
You go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say the same thing, that the link on the county website today, or it's been the same link, I guess, for a while, it's a dud. It tells you, I get an error message that is for meeting on January 5th, although the website says it's for January 12th. And I got it because Don forwarded me another invite from Austin, but I'm wondering who all is out there trying to click in, and they're just getting, they're not getting anywhere. And the other thing I was going to say, I mean, you called on me. I appreciate that. I watched the last one, and I kept trying to raise a hand. It wouldn't do it.
Mhm.
Somehow there's no raise hand icon on this meeting. I don't know what happened, but anyway, separate from that, I did have a question, and I was hoping to, if it's time for questions, other than
It is.
I think there's people probably interested in this that are unable to access it. I had sent couple photos, and I had a concern that the approach, as I understand it, in the attachment 2, and this is specifically regarding loading spaces, that staff's conclusion is that because the board frequently waives loading spaces, therefore loading space formulas must be lowered, and they're very drastic drops in the chart. And I have a concern that staff has failed to understand the functional interrelationship between accessible parking spaces and loading spaces. In buildings where there are no loading spaces or not enough loading spaces, by default, there are deliveries all day long. The trucks park by the door. And all too often, those trucks block the disabled spaces. And I sent a couple photos. I sent one from last Thursday or Friday, and one from lunch today. Both times I wanted to park in the disabled space, and both times that once there was a FedEx guy blocking it, and one guy, and then today it was some kind of delivery. I don't know what it was. And the conclusion that I read from the white paper is that essentially, it's just for a minute. They can park in the aisles. The developers are being oppressed by the cost of providing the loading spaces. And I think staff has entirely missed the boat on the approach on that little narrow issue. And maybe I'm just being selfish about it, but you can't, there are way too many waivers of loading spaces already. And additional waivers of loading spaces prevent access to the accessible spaces. And I don't mean to be yelling, but this is awful. This is really embarrassing, and particularly in view of One Fairfax and the idea that everybody should be treated in such a way with these regulations that they're not being discriminated against. I'll stop yelling, but has staff backed away from the across the board loading space waivers, and has staff determined that the conflict with the accessible spaces is a low priority, and that we need instead to favor the cash to the developers, that they benefit from deleting the loading spaces? What changes, if any, can be made to unbreak that?
Well, I'll start on a little bit. So loading spaces, something we looked at with our consultant, and when they looked at it, they felt
Is
that
that Clarion?
correct, as well as Nelson Nygaard. We looked at that, and they looked at other jurisdictions, and they, looking at that, they felt that our loading requirements were excessive compared nationwide, as well as complicated. So we looked at that, as well as understanding a decade of working in zoning evaluation, where every multifamily development and almost every office development received waivers of loading because they were, quite frankly, out of date. In multifamily, it's not unusual under the current requirements to require 4 to 5 loading spaces per multifamily development. Every multifamily development went through, got a waiver to 1 or 2 spaces. Particularly to multifamily, every developer, everyone that came through the process had the same comment, was that they control move in, move outs, they control the loading, they control the elevator. They can control when people will need to access the loading area or not. It's not open around, it's only open by appointment. That's also essentially true for most office developments that ask for modifications to the loading or waivers of the loading. So that's part of the reason we looked at it. Now, what we're proposing here is a couple of things. One is currently loading only applies to 29 uses in the ordinance. If it's not listed one of those 29 uses, the loading requirement is not there. So we've expanded that to any use potentially has a requirement for loading, but it is a different requirement than today. So we've done a couple of things. We are looking at exempting the first 10,000 square foot. I think we published at 25, we're revising that. And again, that's consistent with what Clarion and Nelson Nygaard has talked about nationwide for loading, as well as we're looking at modifying the requirements. So in many cases, it does result in a lower requirement today. But that's where we've been, part of the analysis has been.
Isn't there like below 50,000 for office, or isn't there a minimum, and basically staff is saying below a certain square footage, nothing is required?
Correct. So
and that's what I'm saying. That creates an instant conflict, and all day long there's going to be FedEx and UPS and whoever it is, and on those sites you're creating an instant problem.
and
it's
certainly
not a problem that should be perpetuated. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so sharp on this, but this is awful.
okay.
Well, I just want to say a couple of words about it. I did see the pictures that were sent showing the loading situations. I know one of them, there was a van parked in the accessible space outside a restaurant. And I'm familiar with that site, and the loading is actually in the back of the restaurant. So there is a loading spot for that vehicle, but the vehicle's driver chose to park in the accessible space. And,
I don't think.
you know,
the
I don't know
restaurant-
that we can legislate convenience or the perception of convenience with regard to accessible parking. There are enforcement mechanisms that are available, but
And that's baloney, Mike. I can't call, I mean, the truck will be gone by the time anybody comes out.
and
It wasn't
that's
the
But
restaurant,
Mike's
it was
point
the-
was that
it was the
that
kitchen
specific,
and bath.
that site has a loading spot. That driver is not using it.
right.
That was the point he just made. And and that's, in some cases, that will be the case, whether it be loading or not. Certainly we don't excuse people blocking, accessible parking spaces. We don't think that's appropriate at all, but, in that situation you showed, as Mike has mentioned, there's loading in the back of that facility. They chose not to use it.
So just to sum up, I understand now staff's recommendation is below 50,000 square feet on office, 0 loading space.
No, that is not, it's what we published at 25,000 square feet and below. We're revising that to 10,000 square feet and below for
So
the
below
uses.
10,000 square feet, a little office like a doctor's office, something, no loading
Correct.
spaces,
Correct.
0.
Correct. If they want to provide loading, they're more than welcome to, but would not be a requirement of the ordinance.
All right, I don't want to monopolize the time, but I think there are other unaddressed deficiencies remaining besides the technical impossibility of people participating in this meeting.
Can I just interject because I can't raise my hand and I apparently can't get a video to show you I'm raising my hand. This is Susan Jolie. Since we I imagine will not have the amount of participants that we had anticipated. I'd like to take a moment, if I could, to go back and follow up on some issues or questions I had from our last meeting. And I had at that time specifically asked what study had been performed concerning my community, Annandale, and the adequacy of parking under the existing regulations. And I don't think I got a satisfactory answer. And I think that perhaps, and this is based on my 45-year career as a regulatory lawyer with federal government transportation issues, it would be useful to understand exactly what empirical data has been collected and what studies have been performed. And I can also tell you, based on my experience, is that you can find an expert witness or consultant to pretty much tell you anything you want to hear. The way you keep the process somewhat reliable is that you publish all the information, you allow other people to comment on it, to critique the adequacy of the analysis, to bring to the attention of the regulator critical aspects that they are missing, to dispute the fact that a particular community, for example, fits the stereotype that your consultants are applying, whether the national trends have any relevance to the discussion. So it seems to me, first act, could you please publish consultant studies and any empirical data you have collected that relates to parking allowances under the current formula for commercial, residential, and office spaces in specific communities. Would you please provide us with any empirical data and analysis that's been performed concerning demographics, the ability of residents in specific communities to access transit, mass transit? I know UMTA, the Urban Mass Transit Administration at DOT, has got a lot of studies on that, which would be, I think, informative. I think as well, some issues that need to be, and perhaps you have examined them, I just don't see any evidence of it. And we need to take a look at the infrastructure. There's assumptions about walkability based on labels of some territory being a walkable or transit hub. And and the conditions on the ground don't match at all. So there needs to be some attempt to, I think, get a factual database. These are decisions that will affect our communities for decades to come. And it seems to me the first thing you do is get a baseline assessment of where you are. And then you make reasoned decisions based on the data you've collected, and reliable studies of that would predict future usage. On another question that I raised last time, I said I did not have notice. I don't think my neighbors had any idea what was going on, and I was told that there was plenty of public research outreach. And again, non-specific response. So I'd like a detailed explanation of what specific steps were taken. I fully understand that there are people out there whose jobs, their business, developers and communities that service their needs are going to be using websites and communication from the planning office. They're going to know what's going on, and maybe they'll even applaud measures that are in their financial interest. My concern is, how does the community learn of these things? My supervisor has a list of all the civic and homeowners associations in my area, in Annandale. A letter would have been good. But in addition to that, a key component of federal rulemaking is adequate notice to the public. You need to explain your regulation. You need to, the concern I have is that descriptions of the process and descriptions of the objectives and all that is a lot of puffery. It really is aspirational. It uses a lot of trendy buzzwords. But again, it's not providing particularly useful information to the community so they can make an independent evaluation. I'd also comment, and this is all with a desire to make these planning processes actually serve communities' needs. The residents of communities oftentimes are aware of conditions that would bear on the reliability. So you could pick a parking lot and say, oh, I did a utilization study and there was too much space. Well, the community may have an explanation for that, such as the tenants have all been thrown out of one of the buildings in anticipation of changing the use of the property. The other thing we might have some insight on actually is the alleged walkability, the ability of residents to in fact use transit to fit their needs. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why community input would be, I think, useful in getting a program that could generate support among the community. And I'm sure there are a lot of places in Fairfax County. There are a lot of opportunities for, I guess you call it brown space development. You're starting with basically areas that readily lend themselves to redevelopment. In older suburban communities, the planning model under which they were developed was car-centric. That was the real fashionable planning idea then that was implemented. Well, you just don't imagine all of these conditions go away. And that's what I think has happened. I don't think you can sit there and imagine that somehow Annandale is New York City or California or wherever else some academic performed a study. I just really would like to have some assurance that there is a careful, cautious, thoughtful process that underpins the proposed regulatory changes. I'll get off my soapbox, but I do have expectations that have been based on years of experience with regulatory processes. And to be honest, this was revealing. It was eye-opening to me, and I have great deal of knowledge of things that are really turn out badly, but are labeled unintended consequences. They weren't unintended consequences. They were perfectly predictable, but they were not identified or acted on. And that's what I fear is happening here. Thank you for your attention.
I'll touch base real quick on the participation. We first started the project. We've gone to the Planning Commission board on multiple occasions, which have been all open to the public. Have been broadcast on channel 16. Those have been available and with links on our webpage for anyone who wants to watch or previously watch them. We did open houses with the board members at the initial kickoff of the project. We did, this is our 8th open house. We had some technical difficulties on tonight, but we've had open houses inviting comments on each one of those occasions. We met with board members, asked them for, people that, organizations they would like us to contact to meet with. When they gave us a list, we reached out to those organizations and asked if they'd like to meet with us. The ones that responded back, we did. I will finish, please.
Sure.
We published our rates for consideration, I believe June or July. We published draft text of the entirety ordinance in November. So it's been out there for quite a bit of time, for consideration to talk about. We've had our names and numbers for ability to provide comments since we kicked this off over a year ago. So there's certainly been our intent to provide adequate and as much comment ability for people to respond and provide comments on what we've been proposing.
And I'll also add that each supervisor's district, barring again, we do apologize for the issues tonight. That's the first time it's happened in over a year, and do apologize about that. But we've sent out meeting links, blurbs to the community, et cetera, to all 9 different magisterial district offices who have then put it in their newsletters and then blasted it out as well through their different channels.
If I may, this is all real inside baseball, because what you're doing is you're using communication channels to which some people have access and knowledge, but generally the community at large does not. And they don't spend their lives trying to troll around the Fairfax County websites to get information. I would say there's a real simple way to check the adequacy, not the effort. I'm not disputing your effort. I'm questioning the adequacy of whether individuals who might be very drastically impacted by these proposals have really been participating, had an ability to participate meaningfully. So there's a real easy way to check this out. And the last time I raised this question, I asked how many people were participating, and I was told glibly that, oh yeah, we don't keep track of who signs in for these town hall meetings. I've heard from other people that sometimes the staff outnumbered the public participants, but there's a real easy way to do this, to figure this out. Take the number of participants off the Zoom screen, subtract the number of county personnel, subtract the people who are developers and their professionals who would be participating in these meetings with their financial interest, paramount importance, and then you get a number. And we'll see if in fact there are hundreds of people availing themselves of all these briefings and the information you're providing. I'll be happy to withdraw my concern, but I just don't think it happened because I know that I do not spend my life trying to chase down every proposal coming out of Fairfax County.
Okay,
Susan,
thank you. We're going to move on to the next person.
So you're not going to implement. You're not going to implement.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. There's no way for us to get 1 million people to participate in these processes. I mean, but we're going to move on to the next, but thank you.
Bill,
Yeah,
can
but
I ask something real fast before you move on? And that's just, I've gotten a number of emails from people who say that they can't, from my community, who said that they can't get in or that they've gotten in by the phone, but that they're I don't know, the meeting isn't acceptable to them by the phone. Is there any way you can schedule another meeting since this was going to be the last one? Is there any way you can schedule another one next week that since it's the last one before you go to the board of supervisors and so forth? Because I know a lot of my community would like to attend the meeting.
We'll look into that, and it's very
Okay.
likely that we can have some sort of another meeting. It may not be the same time, but something that we can do to to address those issues.
Thank you, Austin.
Mhm. Now, Sonia, you've had your hand up, and go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand everybody's frustration. I too wasn't able to get in. I missed the presentation, so I don't really have a lot of that information. I was able to call in. And there are ways for the folks on the phones to interact. You can do *9 to raise your hand, and then *6 enables you to unmute yourself when it comes time. So I think it's important to at least allow the folks who are on the phone to understand how they can participate in this meeting. And I agree that it would be helpful to have an additional meeting, because the wrong link really presents a lot of challenges for those who have been following this process all along and want to learn the latest and greatest of what's going on. That said, I do want to say that I'm very grateful for this process. I'm glad that the county is looking at changing the parking requirements. I think it's time that they reduce the parking requirements, especially as is being proposed near transit station areas, in areas of greater density with greater access to transit. So I'm very glad for that. I did want to know, I'm very pleased that this is including bicycle requirements, because that's something that has been really, we don't have bicycle requirements now, and that's a big problem. I am concerned, however, that what is being proposed for the bicycle parking is too low. It's much too low. You're not going to get enough bike parking for these multifamily dwellings. And the number of people that live in there. And you can go out there today and see how overloaded bike racks are that exist. So I do hope that you can reconsider and increase the amount of bike parking that should be required. I also wanted to note with regards to that is the different tiers. I'm a little perplexed as to why like the community business centers, the CBCs, would be at a lower rate than the transit areas, because we're investing in bus rapid transit along some of these corridors like Route 1, Richmond Highway, and essentially these are going to be transit station stops where those CBCs are, and so they should have more bike parking in those areas as well. So I think I wanted to note that, and the other thing, I wish that this proposal would address some of the design of surface parking lots. I think I have expressed in prior meetings concern about people who are trying to walk or bike to shopping centers or to places and have to navigate these large surface parking lots. And ensuring, this seems to me to be an opportunity to ensure that there is sidewalks included or safe ways for people to walk through parking lots. That, I think in prior presentations, you had called it a gulf of parking lots that, stand between the people on the street or coming off the bus stops and trying to walk to the stores and restaurants. So I still hope that there can be some consideration of other types of design elements if in fact, we are still going to require people to have surface parking. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm sorry that you missed the presentation, because we did actually show a proposal that we're considering to enhance the access through the parking lots. Because, we've gotten some comments from the community about looking at ways to potentially do that. So we're
ready to be an e-commerce pioneer,
working with our county attorney's office to see if there is a way forward with that. So so we appreciate your comments and just wanted to reiterate that we're looking at that. The next person who has their hand up is Bruce Wright.
Hi there. Thanks for taking the comments. I'll echo some of the earlier comments regarding the link. We sent out a blast to our supporters and gave them the link without the phone information. And so there are many people, I think, who potentially want to join the meeting, and a second meeting or a subsequent meeting, I think would be a good idea, as well as possibly extending the comment period from January 16th to possibly a week beyond that. So having said that, thank you for going through this process. It's desperately needed, I think. Some of our strip retail parking, it's just grossly overparked and continuous impervious surface that is doing real harm to our watersheds. And even those parking lots could be cut up currently to give a little bit more permeable surface. Want to commend you for including the bicycle parking requirements. As the previous speaker had noted, we currently have guidelines that aren't often implemented, or they are. I think county's doing a good job of trying to use those, but the implementation is not going well. And I think part of the problem is there aren't good specifications in the zoning ordinance to ensure that developers do the right thing. And I'll give you an example. I live in a new condo, and we do have a bike room with bike parking, fortunately, and that was a requirement for getting here. And the county encouraged them to put it in, but all of the racks are hanging racks. And my wife's 50-pound e-bike doesn't hang. And so not only do we need the requirements, we need the specifications about spacing, about the type of racks, floor mounted versus wall mounted. And I think finally, I'll say that our group and folks that I know are aware of this process. So I think you've done it as good of a job as possible in this huge county to get the word out. We know there've been a lot of meetings, and we've looked at a lot of the early drafts of the information. Regarding the multifamily parking, I said I live in a condo with 36 units, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding, and I'm not in one of the high density areas. I'm about a mile from Metro, but I'm beyond a mile. According to the requirements, there would be 3 parking spaces for my building. Currently, as I said, we have a bike room with 17 racks, and it's full. And there are people that can't put their bikes in that rack. And even though they are hanging, people are using them. So I think 3 racks for a 36-unit building is inadequate. So I would recommend rethinking that and maybe using even at the higher level, there would only be 8 parking spaces in this building, is the way I understand it. Hopefully I'm interpreting it correctly. But so I would put a pitch in for increasing those minimums and maybe even doubling them across the board, and reducing or increasing the lower end as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, and we'll continue to look. We're still looking at bicycle to try to get to the right size for that. We've made some additional modifications that we will be talking about at our next meeting. We're still talking about them internally, but our next meeting with the board. So hopefully that will increase the supply, the minimum requirements for supply. But I appreciate your comments.
And we appreciate getting the information out to us before you go to the board, so that there are opportunities to make those kind of changes. So,
well, it's definitely a situation where we're talking to the board in February, and then there'll be a release of additional information, but the public hearings will still be after that in April and June.
Right.
So there will still be more time, I guess, to address everyone's comments about tonight's meeting. This is not the end all be all of the circumstance with the public input to this project. It's just, we are at a point in the project where we're making recommendations. And so that was why we wanted to schedule these meetings before we made a final recommendation, to get feedback from the community. So, we're not closing the door to that. And as Austin indicated, we may still have another meeting to get additional feedback. But I just wanted to let everyone know that this is, there's still adequate time for public input as part of this project. And with that, I will turn to Daniel, who is the next person in line with a question or a comment.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel DeCoco. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. I agree with the overall premise of this initiative, and I'm happy that our development teams are trying to encourage better land use, more walkability, safer transit environments. They're all great endeavors for many reasons, but it seems like a lot of concerns a lot of concern centers around the idea that increasing our population density while disincentivizing and reducing future parking development will result in excessive amounts of cars that overflow into our nice, quiet, calm neighborhoods, and or a lack of parking availability when we need it. I feel as though the missing piece in this discussion here is transit availability and viability. It hasn't really been discussed much other than the casual mention of walkability or bikeability, but it will take time for the density to improve. So it's important to understand, how we're going to get from point A to point B as parking diminishes and population increases. I know transit isn't the explicit goal of this initiative, but I'm sure that your team is aware of transit-oriented plans and you're planning these standards with those other transit modes in mind, such as the Richmond Highway BRT. But roads like 236/Duke Street that cut through Annandale and Route 50, they're going to need solutions like this too. Can you talk a little bit about other transit initiatives in Fairfax County that will help to reduce the need for cars to facilitate this parking initiative? And like, aside from the Richmond Highway project, do we have plans for other bus rapid transit systems, trams, light rail, restructuring, increasing frequency of existing bus routes, anything that will serve to make public transit a more viable option than the personal vehicle?
Well, I don't have any specific information about another agency within the county. The Fairfax County Department of Transportation operates the transit systems in conjunction with WMATA. There are other, it's a constant circumstance of FCDOT making adjustments to enhance transit service. I did used to work for that agency, so I do have some familiarity with how they operate. I'll note that, one example of that, or actually two examples. One example is the express lanes on I-66. And with the construction of those express lanes, they are restructuring their transit service to provide better service within that corridor. So for example, they're building a new transit garage in the Fairfax Corner area. And along with that, they are serving that with express bus service. So that is going to be an improvement that for that specific area enhances the opportunities to use transit. And so development around those areas will have better opportunities than today to get to transit and to get faster and easier access to other mass transit facilities. The other element that has resulted in some additional transit service is the Silver Line extension to Loudoun County. As part of that extension, Fairfax DOT made adjustments to their connector service to be able to provide better service within the Dulles Suburban Center, which is one of the areas that we have proposed to have a 10% lower requirement than the baseline requirements. And part of that rationale was this expansion of service. It's modest, but the baseline requirement proposal is also modest. So, what we're trying to do with this project and parking is to have an ability to build upon those opportunities as they come about. Another participant had mentioned the BRT system at Richmond Highway, and that perhaps we should be more innovative in that corridor than what is proposed in the project. But from that point of view, we can continue to look at the Richmond Highway corridor and the service and the results of that service, the BRT system when it becomes operational, and we can make adjustments to the minimum parking requirements as we go along. And places like Annandale and can also have those adjustments as development opportunities occur and additional transit is added in those areas. So, well, our intention is to have this be a document or an approach that is adaptable to changes in the community and making adjustments as we move along associated with that.
So in a sense, it's kind of like a foundational thing that is going to set up all of these other opportunities for transit modes to connect the region.
Yeah, and that's, part of the discussions that we've had in these community meetings is it's a very, planning and these types of efforts are very iterative in the sense that you set the stage for example, the county over the past 20 years has really focused their planning efforts on development associated with the metro rail station areas in the county. That's where the most intense development is expected. So from that point of view, when you look at parking, you want to be able to support that transit opportunity. And if you can still get to that area easily by a car, and there's more sprawled development in those areas that requires you to use a car to get around in those areas, then you're not really supporting the rail transit investment that you've made. So, all of this is kind of building blocks, if you will, to get to a circumstance where we're supporting what we're planning in Fairfax County.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next person with their hand up is Fran, I believe.
Hi there. I just have a couple of things that I'd like to mention. The first is, my understanding is that there's a new zoning ordinance coming out dealing with landscaping and screening. Are you folks also talking to the landscaping and screening people so that we make sure that everything works together?
Yes, that process is undergoing right now. We're working with them. We met with them. That's a little bit further behind than the parking is currently. They're looking for something towards the end of this year.
But you will, somehow or other, we're going to ensure that these two plans are going to work together.
Right. As I said, we've provided information at what we're working on. We've talked to them about what they conceptually started with. They're both in the same department. I mean, we're zoning administration processes both applications. So we are very much aware of what they're working on, and they're aware of what we're working on.
Okay. My next question has to do with handicap parking. You may have talked about this a little bit before, but around here, what happens is if there's someone parked illegally, there's a sign that says you can be fined and all of this sort of stuff, but there's no enforcement. The police come out and they say, well, this is private property, we can't take action. The store that is next to the handicap parking says, well, we don't own the land where the handicap parking is, so we can't do anything. So how do we get the handicap parking enforced? That's a question I think maybe you have to work with the handicap people to get something that works, because right now it doesn't work. And while I take advantage of the handicap parking occasionally, I'm sure there are others that are more in need than I am. And I think that's doing a disservice to say we have this and yet we can't enforce it. So maybe you can be talking to the handicap people who should be part of this process also. That's just my comment on the area. And then the last piece, I think, you folks try to do a lot of outreach and a lot of things to get people involved and people aware. But I think there's also a disservice out there in some ways, because just because somebody is working on the task force or your support group or whatever, doesn't mean that that information is going out to the public. So I don't know how what you do to encourage the people that are on these work groups to get the word out to the rest of the district. So I think that's a piece that's lacking in some districts. And maybe there's some way that you can encourage them to either make sure the supervisor puts something out, or the district council, or some other way of getting the word out so that it relieves the burden a little bit from you. But these people are making decisions on our behalf, and yet we don't even know that they're representing us. So that's my comments for the night. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fran. The next person who has their hand up that I can see is Clyde Miller.
Yes, good evening. I have just a couple of quick questions. There will be a staff report prior to the planning commission meeting, just a standard staff report, yes?
Yes, this project will follow all regular zoning ordinance amendment requirements when it comes to notice, staff reports, and authorization ads.
Can we expect the staff report will have a table that compares the proposed parking minimums with the current parking minimums? So they can be compared 1-to-1, I guess, by land use. We're doing this by land use, are we? So will there be a table in that report so we can see, well, just exactly that?
That we have not set up that type of table at this point.
I know we haven't. That's the reason I'm asking for it in the staff report, because it's very difficult to understand what we're talking about.
Well, in many ways, when you look at it, you're comparing apples to oranges, because you're comparing the new may be based on square footage of a building, where the old may be based on employee rate.
I don't
So
care. I don't care,
okay,
whatever it's
well,
based on. Can we
well.
see what the current parking minimums on, if they're based on the number of rabbits in the per acre, and the new one are based on the number of turnip farms? But we need to see what's currently there and what's proposed to be there. If they're different terms, that's fine. But we need to see what need to be able to compare them. So if please take that to heart. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand what we're talking about. We've done, I think, exactly that in the white paper for loading requirements, loading space requirements, right? And that's very helpful. And they are in different terms. That's fine. But we must see the same thing for parking requirements, again, because it's virtually impossible to really understand what Mr. Wright, Bruce Wright, spoke of what the new terms would be for his condo. They seem unreasonable, but I'm not sure that I could compare the two. So that needs to be in the staff report. That's all I'm asking. And the staff report, please, should be published more than 2 weeks prior to the planning commission hearing. You know, that is the state requirement, the minimum, and generally that's what the county does. But many people have said, well, we need more meetings, we need more time, etc. I think we need to see exactly what the proposals are, and then we need some time with that before the planning commission. Because once the planning commission hearing is held, that's the end of real opportunity to influence the proposal. The board assumes what comes out of the planning commission has been vetted with the community. It's not for the board now to worry about details. The planning commission has worked all the details out. So we need time with, please, with the staff report, with the table, for perhaps 30 days ahead of time that the planning commission will meet. Thank you.
Again, I'll reiterate that in November, we did publish the full release of the draft text. There may be some revisions before it goes to planning commission, but the draft text in entirety for Article 6 has been out there for a month and a half now.
Please don't ask me to go through the draft text to get the answers to the questions that I'm raising. That is unreasonable. You cannot expect us to do that. We don't have staffs to do that work. And we don't have time to do that work. It's your job. So please do it, and do it well ahead of the planning commission hearing. Thank you.
What I am saying is that if people want to read the draft text, it's been available for a month and a half.
I'm not asking for a draft
Okay,
text.
thank
I'm
you.
asking for a table. No, thank you.
All right, your comments noted. Tammy, your hand is up and you'll be up next.
Thank you. A couple of things. I completely agree with Clyde Miller. We need tables. We are lay people. Some of us have studied land use for years, but it is the staff's job to make this understandable, not so obscure that people are like, oh my God, I can't figure this out. Just check this box off. That is not how we get good governance. I want to ask a question to Austin and Mike. Based on what you've heard on January 5th, have you made any changes to your program? That's my first question. Have you made any changes based on what you heard last time?
We've continued to review the ordinance. I'm not 100% sure how to answer your question with that, but Mike, would you like to say anything?
No, I mean, we're still getting public feedback. So, when that, after tonight's meeting, we'll kind of assess where we are with the comments that we've received. And we're also have the public input software that we're getting comments through that. So we'll have to collectively look at the feedback we've gotten and see where that puts us with regard to potential changes to the draft information.
Thank you. And the reason I asked this question is we are sincerely hoping and praying that the changes made to the parking ordinance are productive and effective, not for developers, but for the electorate of Fairfax County. And the next question is, if from my reading of this, and I sit on the Resident Planning and Zoning Committee, this is a giveaway, and I'm well aware of the variances and exceptions that are always asked for loading spaces and other parking issues. That doesn't mean they're right. That just means that the developers are asking for them and they're routinely given. And we all who are in this realm of looking at land use a lot absolutely understand who runs the show, and it's developers. And if this is not a giveaway, this parking reduction is not a giveaway, and parts of it are wonderful. The bike issue, totally with it, not a problem with that. Sidewalks for parking lots, not a problem with that. Screening, not a problem with that. The devil is in the details. If you guys, and I brought this up last time, are not going to ensure that there's a fallback in case this reduced parking is a disaster, and you can easily do that by not taking away the spare space, making it open space. Therefore, if you're wrong, in the meantime, we can have trees and things planted that help our climate. But if you're wrong, that area can come back and be vehicle space. We don't know what form vehicles will take in the future. So you're protecting possibilities and opportunities for the future. So if you are serious about this not being a giveaway, you will ensure that that space is not monetized, built on, etc., that it is saved in case this doesn't work. The next thing is Daniel talked about transit plans and whatever. I will say that in my 20 years of watching this stuff, if you had $10 for every plan that Fairfax has, Fairfax hires consultants to make all kinds of plans. We have wonderful plans. What we don't have is any money to carry them out. So wishes aren't fishes, and that has to be understood. As I explained last time, an executive from Comstock made the point at a TSA proposal that you have to have a car if you live in the TSA. I almost fell off my chair, but he's right. And the other point I'll make is a lot of people live rurally. They don't have access to transit. So you're dealing with a formula that, oh, transit is nearby, therefore we don't need the parking, et cetera, et cetera. You actually do need the parking for the people who do need to use cars. Cars are not anathema. Cars are a reality. If folks wish to bike, God love them, e-bike, bike, whatever. But you can't force people who are unable or don't want to bike into bicycles. It just doesn't work. If you want the commerce to be successful, you provide the availability for it to be successful. You don't start chipping away at it and building on it. So if you're wrong, it can't be fixed. The 60% reduction by an administrator is nothing more than obscene. That is a huge reduction. And that is absolutely, common sense tells you that that's nuts. So that's basically, I appreciate the work you all have done. It's obvious that you have put your souls into this, but I'm afraid that you came into this venture with preconceived notions and they haven't wavered too much. And that's why I asked the question. There was a lot that came out of the January 5th meeting, and had you made any changes? And no, we're still absorbing. Well, you can absorb up until the planning commission. If it's not a change, then it doesn't help us. And why are we here at an open house or the planning commission or the board of supervisors? If this is a pre-done deal, just say it's a pre-done deal and we're just going to bully the public into doing what we want to do. So I appreciate other people's comments. I think they were right on. Susan Jolie was right on. I appreciate this, and I hope you have another meeting for all these folks who couldn't get in. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person that has their hand up is Donna Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I realize that it's been said that if this amendment passes, we could have additional affordable housing, which is very good. However, this amendment is also going to be shifting parking cost to residents, parking, more transportation costs, and it's going to be shifting it to all residents. Therefore, some lower income people may obtain some additional affordable housing, but all lower income people will have to pay additional cost in parking and transportation. How does the county justify shifting these costs to the lower income residents who are already struggling economically?
Mike, would you like to address that?
Well, part of it, it's a bit of a complicated issue, I would say, in the sense that I'll use an example. Doesn't fit every circumstance, but if I am looking for affordable housing and I cannot afford any of the rents that are charged, and then an opportunity comes up to have an affordable house in, let's say, in an area where transit is readily available. The cost, but I don't have a car. So the cost of an opportunity is created for someone to have an affordable home that did not have that before. And they have access to transit that supplements the need to own an automobile, which is going to cost them less in the long run than owning an automobile, because not only do you have to buy the automobile, but you have to service the automobile. You have to put gas in the automobile. So that, I mean, that's a simplistic example of a circumstance where providing an ability to create an affordable housing opportunity can be a benefit financially to an individual or a family.
Tammy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, this is killing me, Mike. That is a way crazy, simplistic, doesn't make sense deal. If a person, what are the prices of taking the metro? It's not free. And forget about it if it were free. If the poor person is say a service person that is an apprentice to a plumber and has to go different places all the time, transit is of no use to that person. That person needs a vehicle that can haul tools and goes various places, not accessible. This is the problem with the thinking that transit is the end all be all. Transit can take huge huge number of population from A to B and places along that. And then you can get off and take a bus. Well, by the time you do all this, you're not serving many of the people. We're not a city. We are a suburb. Fairfax is trying to urbanize everything. We aren't urban yet. There are portions of the county that are getting there, and there are portions of the county that will never get there. And yet this ordinance is being impact the whole county, and it's just not right. It is, did much better when it was a plan by plan evaluation, and we weren't giving away parking by developers having to provide parking. We're not talking circus parking. We're talking adequate parking, and adequate is the thing. Builders say this much is adequate. The public says this much is adequate, and the public is the person needing the parking. You can go at this, there's this situation, and I'm not super well versed in it. I read something about it in Falls Church, where one of the people on the working group, the Parking Reimagined working group, is a developer. And he's perfectly fine with people, residents of a building, parking in the Metro garage or on the metered street spaces. We are not Manhattan or Brooklyn or anybody that has metered parking. Who can afford that? Who can get to a meter to pay for a car overnight, etc.? That just makes no sense. So equality, climate change, that's what we're after in Fairfax County when we're all said and done. And I promise you, there is not a developer in Fairfax that is on the lower end of the equality scale. They are not the people that need the help. And we know that the lower income and the medium income, and with inflation, God knows where that's going to stop. With COVID, we don't know where our society is going to end up. I went through this last time. So to say a person makes a choice of transit and not owning a car, one person can do that, the next cannot. And if you preclude them from the opportunity for an affordable house by taking away adequate parking, and nobody's answered Donna's question about the parking being decoupled from the affordable house. We'll let you move into that house. We're not going to give you any air to breathe. That's crazy. We're going to let you move into that house, but there's no electricity in it. Come on. People need transit to be viable citizens in the county, to pay their taxes, to make a living, to participate and try to move up the ladder, which is incredibly difficult. That's what's important, is helping people, not cutting their legs off to benefit rich people who don't need it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I believe Sonia has her hand up.
Yeah, I want to sort of respond after all of this. And it seems to me in this proposal is offering flexibility for the different parts of the county, right? There are more rural areas that are not in transit-oriented areas. There are suburban areas. There are the transit-oriented areas that are more urban than other parts. Like, I think everybody gets that there's a lot of different needs in the county. But I think that this strikes a good balance. Personally, I don't think it goes far enough in reducing the how much we focus on vehicles and driving, and the more, how impactful that is inherently to our environment. No, not everybody's going to give up driving, but the more we can shift people from having to drive, who might bike, who might walk, who might use transit, the more we'll be able to move people without cars. There will still be opportunity to park for those who must drive. I would also say that there is costs associated with those parking spaces. They cost money to construct, to buy that land, to use that land to store cars. That money could go to something better for the community, whether that's open space, whether that's affordable housing, whether, there are other opportunities than to store vehicles. But this offers flexibility. I think it's heading us in the right direction. So areas like West Falls Church, where they're revitalizing or redeveloping the transit area to be more urbanized, people who will live there will take transit more than they'll have to drive. Yeah, they'll still have to drive sometimes, and some people will still have to have a car. And that's why there's still some parking. It's not that there's no parking. But some of us do want to have a car-free lifestyle or a car-light lifestyle. And that's the direction we need to shift if we are going to solve for climate and create more healthy communities in the future. Like, this is where we're growing. This is what we're becoming. And this is one step in that direction. So thank you. I just wanted to say that and show my appreciation for this effort. I know it's taking a lot of heat as well. But I do think it's a step in the right direction. So thanks.
Thank you.
I have to respond to that.
So actually, we want to get a chance for people to have a chance to speak, Tammy.
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that everyone that had to call in tonight, because they
Okay.
couldn't get on
Sure.
the join via the Zoom link, can
And I have a question too.
Yes, understood. Anyone who's on the phone that would like to ask a question, if you press *6 on your phone, that will unmute you, and feel free to do that, introduce yourself, and then ask your question. So again, it's pressing *6 will unmute you, and then you can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Yeah,
Hello.
this is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's go with the person with the four numbers ending in 2017 was the first one to come on.
Yeah, that's me. I'm Mark Dainert. I'm with Ravenwood Park, live there, and I also serve on the board of the Civic Association. And I also did have trouble getting in tonight, as everybody else has said. And I've also, I must admit, I've been very busy with things like the Justice High School situation, where the school wanted to put a parking lot in the park, and we had to do a lot of work with that, and working with life-threatening flooding situation in our neighborhood related to Leesburg Park development, past and future. So I haven't had time to really look at the parking ordinance and the parking proposals, but I wanted to give some observations and just ask a few questions. The first area is data and realities. Have you all looked at existing vehicle numbers and trends versus population in the county? Like, either have access to the DMV and or the county, vehicle tax records to know how many vehicles there are in the county, and do some correlations with how that's going. And also, when I walk around, I live in the Seven Corners area, that you'll notice often there's a lot of Maryland vehicles parked in like the parking areas around the apartment. So I'm told that people license their cars in Maryland and live in Virginia. So to make sure that we know what the trends are with regard to population density, population growth, and numbers of cars. And then your realities in the Seven Corners area and the Bailey's Crossroads area, there is no metro, so it makes it more challenging. We have a low-income senior housing project that's going to be going up along Leesburg Pike, and there's like no sidewalks between that area and the Seven Corners Shopping Center. But a reality also is that the people that are involved with the low-income senior housing said most low-income seniors drive vehicles to get to and from the grocery store. They don't walk on the sidewalks that don't exist. So, and then with the Justice High School expansion and the whole thing with the parking lot and the parks, people still say the students need parking. They got to go, from school to work, and they can't necessarily take the bus. So these are the realities that I see in our neighborhood area that drive continued needs for parking. And I don't even know how long this has been happening, but I've noticed along Patrick Henry going into the Ravenwood Park neighborhood, it just seems like there's more and more commercial vehicles, vans, and cars parked on both sides of the hill, making get a little bit difficult to get through in the traffic. And we know from people that live right there, and I've even observed myself, that these cars are parked in the apartment buildings across Route 7, where there is parking, but apparently not enough parking. It seems like it's a growing problem with more and more cars parking in the residential streets. Other realities, you drive through some of these areas, I say with commercial vehicles, they'll park a moped on the street to keep their parking spot so that when they get back. So, and I drove this one day last week, 2 days last week, early in the morning out towards Tyson's along Route 50. And it seemed like, half the vehicles were commercial. So the need for commercial vehicle parking for so many of these areas, and the need for parking is a reality. We also somehow need to have Fairfax County Public Schools and other government, but at least the schools, to address so that when they're going to expand in the Bailey's Crossroads, Seven Corners area, as the comprehensive plan says for that area, they need to address vertical and shared parking, not trying to have more open surface parking lots. And then in the Route 7 shopping center, there's parking lots for the refurbished mall, but there's no sidewalk, pedestrian access, ADA access, and ability to get strollers to the mall from the Route 7 site. So as we do development, we need to somehow integrate the need for pedestrians and parking lots to be able to make it easy for people to get in and out. And again, I thank you all for your efforts. Those are just my feedback comments.
Thank you so much. Anyone else on the phone that would like to have their comments heard?
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can somebody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I have an observation. I just want to mention, I think you all might be jumping the gun here on these reductions. As we enter, this new phase with more electric vehicles, I think, the climate issues are somewhat abated, the concerns by many. And some people might even be more inclined to buy cars that are better for the environment. So I'm just making the observation that you might want to go slower. The other thing is, are there going to be electric charging stations at handicap spaces?
We're not requiring electric charging spaces at handicap spaces right now.
I would recommend it.
Okay.
And perhaps even loading docks.
Okay.
If we're moving in that direction, I think there need to be accommodations for those things, especially for individuals who are disabled and use electric vehicles. There need to be accommodations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Was there anyone else on the phone who would like to have their comments heard or had any questions?
Yes, this is Howard Albers. I have a question for, I guess, the staff people there. How were the 5%, 10%, and the 15% of the vehicle parking spaces derived on to derive the amount of bicycle spaces? What was the rationale for doing that, and how was that determined?
Mike, would you like to address that?
Yeah. We were working with FCDOT on developing, Fairfax County Department of Transportation, I should clarify, on developing the proposed minimum requirements for bicycle parking. So it was a collaborative effort to develop those rates. But I will note, and I had noted it in the earlier discussion, that we're still looking at how those are applied, because we want to make sure that there's continued progressive growth in the amount of bicycle parking provided as you move through the tiered framework. So we're looking at that, and we'll probably have a revised approach on that in the coming weeks that will create that progressive approach based on the baseline rates for auto parking, and then the percentages would be applied to those. So that will give some additional parking requirements as well as this progression that I spoke of.
Did the consultants have any input into these numbers for the bicycle parking rates? Or is that all from the FCDOT?
There was some consultant information provided as well, so that was also incorporated in the proposal.
I would suggest that when the staff report is published, that a good discussion and analysis be done to outline how this was arrived at, because other jurisdictions in other states that are bicycle friendly, shall we say, and progressive, have a much different approach. And I would suggest that the staff look at those areas as well. And the other thing, the tables that you have out for comment, they do not talk about school parking, recreation centers, or libraries. Why are those numbers not included for bicycle parking?
They are included, they're just included in another category. The public use would cover the libraries. Schools, I believe, is called out. I can double check that, but I believe.
If you would, because I couldn't find it, and if it's pretty fuzzy for someone that's not a parking specialist.
Well, I think it's under schools, comma, private. That's the way the ordinance is written today, and that's how schools are. The public schools are put into that category of private schools, and that's discussed in the auto parking rates. If we need to
okay, so is
clarify
it 10% of the auto parking then? Let's say it's an elementary school in a, someplace in Annandale or someplace that's not transit oriented, kind of the middle tier. So that would be the 10% of the automobile parking, and that's
correct.
Under the current proposal, it would be 10% of the parking provided within a given site. But as I said, we're looking at revising that to be based on the baseline requirement for any given use, which will change the amount of bicycle parking that is required. It will within the tiered framework.
I don't understand that, but Mantua Elementary School, it's in the middle of lots of homes, and bicycle friendly commuting there. And they have these bicycle racks that will bend the front wheels, and it's kind of an afterthought, and some other schools as well. And I just would hope you would take another look at that and include that in your discussion in the staff report, discussion and analysis. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will note that the requirements that are drafted do have some design criteria in them to hopefully avoid situations where new bicycle facilities are inadequate in the sense of providing these, I'll say, wheel bender racks, as you phrased it. So,
is that going to be in the ordinance?
That, yes.
Like some other states have or other jurisdictions have?
The language talks about, the language in the ordinance discusses the design, and this is something we work directly with FCDOT on to get an acceptable design for them to put into the ordinance so that, it's a universal design that is nationally acceptable.
So if they have to have 40 bicycle spaces, it's got to meet those standards as specified in this other document then. Is that what I'm hearing?
So it's Howard, it's 6102. It's the bicycle parking provisions, and it's under general provisions on our current draft. Like Mike said, we're tweaking these things, but it's currently within that section, the general provisions part of the bicycle parking requirements that talks about locational and design standards and minimum locational design standards for bicycle parking spaces.
Okay, it's not, I read it 3 times and I sit on the workforce committee, and it's not a clear as it could be in my mind, but thanks for your help.
I will send you the relevant text in an email and you can have a look at it. And if you have any questions, let me know.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, is there anyone else that joined via phone that would like to say anything? If not, I would go to the hands that are currently.
Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, yeah, the 202 number there came on. Go ahead.
Yes, this is James Heckle, and I just want to say that I support the the Parking Reimagined. I'm just now looking into this stuff today, and I think it's all moving in the right direction. And I appreciate the work that you guys do. I've used to work at a municipal office that had a zoning committee or commission. So thank you very much for this, and I look forward to looking into it more. I support reducing parking spaces for cars and increasing requirements for bicycles as well, and making public transit, more center and focus. I think it's easy for us who drive all the time to get used to that and not see the alternatives. But for people that don't have the choice and, if their car's in the shop or whatever, and look for other ways to see how difficult it is to get around, even, on a sidewalk from one neighborhood to another, I think it's all these sort of things are good to look at. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else on the phones that would like to have a
Yes.
comment?
Yes, just a question to follow up on something someone mentioned before. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. How many people do not? Do we have data? How many people do not own cars in Fairfax County?
That's not data that we readily have. At least our working group readily has. Mike.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but there is American Community Survey data that we have looked at, or I have looked at in particular, that gives vehicle ownership. I will note that overall in Fairfax County, there 72% of people commute by a personal vehicle, which leaves 28%, math's not my first subject, 28% of people who commute to work by some other means or work at home. And that is pre-pandemic data, not current data. So I will just note that, this has been, and over the 10 to 20 year span from the pre-pandemic data from 2019, that number of people who are commuting to work by an alternative means other than their personal vehicle has grown by about 10%. So it's reflective of, this holistic approach that we've been looking at with regard to, trying to provide more parking flexibility to address these trends in people's lifestyles, decision-making, et cetera, as well as the development density areas of Fairfax County.
Okay. And I've asked before for some data from the residents or people who live in transit station areas to see, what their commuting habits are. Do they rely primarily on, yes, it's there, transit, Metro's there, but are they relying on it primarily as their means of transportation, or are they using cars? I think I've brought up that there was a supervisor in the past, Linda Smith, who lived near, I guess, Dunloring, I think, or Vienna metro station, and she said it's astronomical the number of cars that people have, and they live, so close to mass transit. So I just think there should be better data to see, what people's transportation habits are that close to rail, and if people do, what, in these walkable communities, everyone wants to say you can live, work, and play all in the same area. How many people actually do that? How many people actually live near where they work? Do we have that data? I think that would be good to know.
Well, I think, we have gotten vehicle demand data from various areas adjacent to Metro, with some of the development proposals that we've looked at as part of this project. But the other element to that conversation is people may own a vehicle, but they might not need to use it for all of the trips that they are making. So if
But just find
I,
out that data. What are they doing? Are they using the vehicle on weekends? Are they using it, to run errands? Or, just it would be good to, have that data available.
I'm not sure that we can get data that specific. But, we can certainly look at some broader circumstances and trends to kind of make these assessments with regard to frequency of vehicle use and, proximity of services, entertainment options, access to rail, work that's close, using rail to access work. I might own a vehicle, but I'll walk to a restaurant in my neighborhood, or I'll get on the metro to commute to work. But I'm not using a vehicle. I'm not creating a demand for a parking space at another location. I might be storing a vehicle at my house, but I'm reducing the number of vehicle trips and the parking demand because I'm making these other choices through my day or my week or month. So,
And
that's
these people also just another data point. Would these people also have guests? Is there sufficient parking for their guests? Those guests might not live near rail and they have to arrive at this transit station area apartment building by car. And do these people feel there's sufficient parking for those things?
well, I don't know how deeply I can get data for that, but I appreciate the suggestion.
You had mentioned, Mike, you had a couple of developments in mind in the Tysons area that you might be surveying the Tysons area. So, and I had followed up last week to see if you had that data yet, but we'll wait to hear back.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're still working on that. So thank you for your follow-up question.
Sure.
All right. Lynn, you've had your hand up. I saw you also put something in the chat too. And let me give you that option to
yeah, I'm going to forego the chat because I've got additional questions that after coming back and listening to some of the comments that folks have made. I appreciate it. And Austin, first of all, I want to thank you and the staff and everyone for all of the work that has gone into this Parking Reimagined initiative. I will say honestly, this has come to the Reston Citizens Association within the last month. So we have tried in earnest to get these meetings out to the community. And I think that the incident that happened this evening is quite unfortunate, since we posted the link out on Facebook, on our community pages. And I really do think that we've missed an opportunity here. And in the process, I think we've hurt our own credibility with the community. But I'm hoping that there will be another meeting that we can go back to the community and say, we're sorry, please attend this meeting. So that being said, I have promoted during previous meetings, and this was on a personal basis, that I think that the removal of any parking to allocate that to additional floor area ratios for developers should be equally matched with that parking going back to its original state of open space. There's a great need for green space in Fairfax County and in particular Reston, and as part of our planning principles. So, I think that on a local level, it is something that really does need to be considered. I will observe that, and it's just my observation, that I do think this Parking Reimagined program benefits the developers more so than the local community. I think it was the gentleman that was on the phone, excuse me, that had a phone number ending in 2017. I wanted to thank him for his comments. And I think that analysis needs to be performed on a local level to determine the average age of the people that live within, and this isn't a micro, so this is going to be a micro local level, to understand the age of the people, whether there are communities that have higher numbers of disabilities, that parking can be managed to meet the needs of that community. And it could be developed on a weighted formula to allocate the appropriate amount of parking. And I will say that development demand proposals do not provide the data that you need in order to effectively estimate parking needs of residents. We can look at the Harrison here in Reston, where there were not enough parking spaces allocated to the apartment building itself. Hence, all of this overflow parking takes place across the street. So it's it really does need to be addressed at a micro local level. And thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you. Tammy, you up next.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Sonia, and I think Sonia, we're on the same page. You made a statement that you said that parking is very expensive and that the money could go elsewhere for better uses. The problem that I agree with you 100%. The problem is the money will not go elsewhere. The elsewhere is in the developer's pocket. It's not to provide more for the community or more green space. So I think we're saying the same thing. You would like more green space, you would like more bike trails, you would like that kind of environment. So would I, so would most people. Our climate needs that, our planet needs that. So if we take the parking space that is going to be reduced and make that a requirement on the site that's reducing it to have that in open space, if it needs to be for transit to make commercial commerce work, that can be done. If not, yay, the community benefits, but it's not going to go anywhere but in the developer's pocket. And that's the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, Donna, you're going to be next, and then we're going to end with David.
Okay. I was just wondering if I could get a commitment from you guys to have another meeting sometime in January, since we've had problems with people not being able to get in. And I was just wondering if I could get that tonight before we leave.
I think it's a safe, I can't tell you a date or anything yet. I do think it's probably a safe assumption that we will have another meeting based on the technical difficulties tonight and the inability of people to join this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
David, you're up, and you'll be our last commenter for the night.
Thank you, Austin. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm a little late joining because I too had problems with finding a link that would get me in. So I'll be brief. I'm familiar with this initiative generally. I haven't read all the provisions of it, but I kind of see where it's going. My general feeling about this is an awful lot of us, maybe most of us, moved to this area to be in a suburban area. And I have nothing against planned towns or use of public transportation. Indeed, when I was commuting to work for 41 years, I virtually always used public transportation when I couldn't walk. But as other speakers have mentioned, public transportation doesn't get you everywhere. People are used to using the cars to do certain things that are really impractical for them to do with public transportation. And I honestly don't see where this really benefits residents, either present ones or even future ones. Present ones who are used to using their cars to get to places. will simply have that ability reduced or find it more frustrating to find spaces that that in the past they've been able to access easily. Future residences in complexes such as the woman who just spoke, you wind up not having enough spaces. You can't park, your guests can't park near there. I don't really see where it benefits anybody other than developers, quite honestly. It makes it cheaper for them. Somebody said, yeah, the money's not going to go somewhere where it'll help. And I agree, it probably won't. There's no way to control that. I have no problem with the whole concept of making public transportation available to people as an option so they don't have to use their cars. Where it really concerns me is when we cross the line into making it painful for people to use their cars and just making daily life more frustrating. I'm kind of worried that reducing the parking capacity in the way that's being proposed here is going to have that effect. And that's pretty much what I've got to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Mike, would you like to say anything?
I just want to thank everyone for their participation tonight. Again, it was a good conversation, lots of points of view, which is very helpful. And so I just want to express my appreciation for that. Thank you very much.
I would just encourage everyone to stay tuned to the webpage. That's what we'll be posting. If we have any future meetings, will be posted on our Parking Reimagined webpage. So that'll be the best way to get any updates on the status of the project.
All right. Well, this meeting, as well as all other meetings that we have hosted, has been recorded. Well, open houses have been recorded and are on the webpage as well. So like Bill said, be looking in the webpage for any future and upcoming meetings to include possibly a remedial meeting for this tonight's technical issue. Thank you, and everyone have a good night.
Okay, thank you.